Hey, I'm ZSH Plays, and we've got something very exciting today. We're going to be building a brand new flat ride from the Thrillseekers Ride Pack and finishing Lake Liberty. Let's go! We've got space to squeeze one more ride into this part of the park here, and we're going to be building our most detailed flat ride yet. We're going all out with this one. And then later on, we're going to add a couple of restaurants in as well. And Lake Liberty will be complete. We've got some final detailing to do as always, but I'm going to do that over the next week before we take a tour of the finished park. So let's talk about the ride. This is Strike, one of the new rides from the Thrillseekers Ride Pack. As far as I'm aware, it's based on a real ride which hasn't even been released yet. That's coming soon to a park, I think it was in Asia I saw. But apart from some of the more crazy movements, it is very similar to a ride at Luna Park called the Atlantic Aviator, where you fly around in planes doing all sorts of crazy maneuvers, and it's all based around 1930s Atlantic aviation. It's a really cool looking ride, and we're going to do the most detailing we've done in this series so far to turn Strike into the Atlantic Aviator, starting with this big globe that sits on top of the ride. I've just cloned the wireframe globe that we have in the game loads of times to get us a nice solid metal sphere here, and then I'm using this mythology light as the pole that comes out of the top of it. Although later on when I hit play, I realised that also caused smoke to come out of the top of it, so we'll switch that out for a different piece later on. And then we're going to get this cogwheel in here, and this forms a compass which sits at the top of the ride. It looks really cool, and we can replicate it really well using some of the pieces here. These new coaster supports from Update 1 are amazing. They go down to 10% size. There's a few new pieces which go really small, which is great for building. And then we're going to put some text on them and do some work on that to turn it into the compass that you can see at Luna Park. Luna Park is one of the 3 parks that has inspired this park. Most of it comes from Belmont Park and Lake Compounce, but I've also been looking at Luna Park as well. It's got that old school American theme park vibe to it. I really love the look of it, but most of the rides there don't correspond as exactly to some of the rides that we have in Planet Coaster 2 as they do at Belmont Park and Lake Compounce, so I've not used that many direct references, but this is one of them. And when it's finished, I am really happy with it. I think it's the best flat ride in the park. We're using the null signs to create the letters for the compass here, and then I'm just using a full stop on a different null sign and using that to put the detail in, so it exactly matches what I saw in Luna Park. Do that quite roughly now, and then we'll tide it up at the end. So that's north, we'll get east in, and then we will move on and start recoloring the actual ride. I'm not sure if these dots are lights or just dots on the original. I couldn't get a close enough view of it, but I'm really happy with how they look at the end. Let's get on to the recoloring. So I'm basically going to match this to the color scheme of the real Atlantic Aviator ride. Some of the flat rides have really powerful color options, and I like the patterns that you can add in as well. That's starting to look nice. It fits in pretty well with the rest of the park, although it's got this sort of bronzed copper kind of colour to it, which we're not seeing anywhere else. That gives it its own identity and more of a 1930s feel. And then the cream and white matches in nicely with all the other rides we've got in the park. The structure of the real ride is a little different, seeing as it's not the same ride. So it's got this big central column, and then the globe sits on the top of it, and the arms that drive the seats for the guests ascend to the top of this before they start moving. Whereas on this ride, the arms themselves actually go up into the air, which is what gets the height for the guests. And later on, we're going to turn those seats into actual little airplanes that the guests can sit in. I did originally try this ride a few weeks ago using the chair-a-plane. That was so old-fashioned, didn't really sort of give the vibe that I wanted, and it's certainly not as extreme a ride as this. This one's going to be a lot more fun. I'm going to add one more of the wireframe globes on the top of this piece here and make it bigger than the globe that we just built. And this is going to be like a cage so that the solid globe sits inside it. We'll put some more dots in and use the rotational symmetry tool to copy this around this column really easily. And then we'll move on to decorating the arms of the ride before we start actually putting the planes in. The arms have like a rocket kind of effect in the middle of them, so we'll do that using some of the art shapes here. So we're going to use whatever a half pronate spheroid is to make the front of it, get that to the right size, and then we use some other shapes and a big star to replicate what I was seeing on the real ride. So with the first of the art shapes in, we're going to use the twinning tool, and that enables us to have it show up on all of these arms in exactly the same place. And then we can start adding in the other shapes that we need to get the rocket finished. So we got this star here. That'll be the main thing on the front of it. And then we're going to use some different art shapes to cover up the back part of the piece. And we're going to move on to my favorite part of the build, building the planes. This was really fun to work out. So the wings are going to be made using this wall decoration. Luckily, it's recolorable, so we can get this to a sort of classic white with red piping, and then start moving this into the position where the wing would be. We need it to be under the seats so that the seats end up becoming part of the fuselage of the plane, but we also need it to be in such a position that the guests' legs aren't going to clip through the wing when they're sat in it. Once we've got this piece in roughly in the right position, then we can clone it and get the other wing in. So we'll move that over there. We'll have a fuselage in the middle so they don't need to join. Just getting him into roughly the right place, and then we'll adjust it later so it's perfect. And then we're going to use this big submarine ballast piece from the aquatic theme to start making the fuselage. So we'll have one of them in here, get it to the right colour, and then we're going to clone it and use a second one to get more of a plane shape in. So we'll have the bottom one pointing up slightly, and then we'll have another one on top of it that's pointing down slightly. Once we get those lined up, that's going to look like a nice natural shape. And then we can use the old half-prolate spheroid again to create the nose of the plane. And again, just get that in exactly the right place, recolor it, and this is starting to look good. We'll tilt each wing up slightly to get that old school plane feel. Planes might still tilt their wings up. I'm not really an aviation expert, but certainly old school planes like this definitely have their wings like that. And then we can do something really fun, which we've not done before, which is use the animation tools. So once we've built this little propeller using the new coaster support pieces, we're going to get one of the rotating animation pieces in and attach that to the plane, and then hide that in the fuselage so it can't be seen. And then we're going to attach the propeller pieces to it so they actually rotate as the plane is flying around. This is probably not the most advanced use of the animation tools that you've seen in this game, but it's the first time we've tried it and I am so happy with it. It looks awesome. We've got one more piece here, this aquatic floor light. This is going to form the tail of the plane and just fit nicely into the arm that comes down from the main arm that the plane is suspended from. And that is our plane pretty much done. Once we get people in here, it looks absolutely amazing. I'm so happy with that. We've got a bit more detailing to do on the ride though. At the bottom of the ride, there's a sort of map, presumably centered around the Atlantic, of where the planes are flying, and we're going to recreate that using the moss decals. If you've watched that channel for a while, you will know that the decals, and especially the moss decals, are some of my favourite pieces in Planet Zoo. I'm so happy they're in Planet Coaster 2 as well, because you can do some amazing stuff with them. So we're getting a bit of a map going on there, and then we'll use a rotation tool to get that covering that base. A few more details, and the ride is ready for its sign. So we're going to be using clouds for this, very appropriate for the ride. We'll get a cloud in, and then we'll get some text in, and pretty much copying this from how it looks in Luna Park. There we go, Atlantic Aviator, bit of a recolor, get rid of that wall, that was just there to keep it straight. And then finally, we're going to cover up as much as possible of the gates, and that's the ride complete. We'll see how it looks in action at the end of the episode. But now we're going to build a couple of restaurants for the other side of the park. We're going to start with a bar restaurant based on one I liked at Belmont Park. And then we're going to use it to create a Viva Vegan as well. This one is essentially going to be burgers and booze, and then the other one will be vegan. So we got lots of different tastes covered, along with the food court that we have on the lake side of the park as well. And once these are done, Lake Liberty is going to be essentially complete. Apart from a few details here and there, I want a lot more signage in the park, which I'll get on with once this episode is finished. I originally imagined this as a 6-episode series, but I was having so much fun with it, I kept extending it, but we've basically run out of room now. There is no more room in Lake Liberty once we've got these couple of restaurants in. I do want it to be cluttered, but also we need the guests in the game to actually be able to get between these rides and walk around without getting stuck. So the 2 restaurants we're building now, along with a little bit more detail that you will see next week, are basically going to fill all the available space that we have left. Starting with Bar Liberty, I began building this, I think it was the day before Update 1 came out, so there was no glass pieces in the game, or no transparent glass pieces anyway. I actually really like the windows and door that we've used here. They do have an advantage, which is you don't have to be so careful about the interior, because you can't see in. But then these glass pieces around this outdoor area here really don't like how they look. So in a second, we're going to switch those out for one of the new transparent glass pieces from Update 1. This outdoor area will have picnic tables in it for the guests to use. And then we'll have a chief beef and a gulpy soda inside. And then we're going to have a roof terrace as well. And we're going to use loads of the support beams to get some detail in here on the roof. And while I finish the roof off, let's talk about last week's coaster, the Cobra. So I mentioned in the episode that I had some issues getting it to do what I wanted it to do. And to be perfectly honest, I wasn't exactly satisfied with the final build. And I went out to you guys and asked for advice on it. So firstly, thank you so much to those of you who responded and gave me tips on how to get the coaster to do what I wanted. Turns out I was using completely the wrong type of coaster, and we do have the correct type of coaster in-game. Unfortunately, that brings us on to this week's issue. Since Update 1, whilst it has fixed lots of the smaller errors that I was encountering, it appears to have introduced a massive new one, which has been driving me insane this week. Every time I open the research screen in this park, the game crashes. I have tried it so many times, but it is just not happening, and the correct coaster that we need is locked on the research screen, and without being able to get in there, I can't get the coaster into the park. So until Frontier fix that, which unfortunately I think is going to be in the new year now, that coaster will have to stay as it is. I don't think it's the worst coaster ever built, but it is much quicker than it should be because it only goes around the track once instead of going around it essentially backwards and then forwards. Once Lake Liberty is complete, I'm going to be doing some serious work on my coaster skills, and we're going to be building some much more complex coasters in the new year. Back to this build, we got the new glass pieces in. They're going to make this bit look so much better. So we're just going to copy these down here. Once we get to the end, we'll delete the old glass pieces that we had in there and just leave the little base that we made. So once we get rid of these, you can see there we've got that white at the bottom, and then we can just move these glass pieces to sit in there. And we've got the beginnings of a nice little terrace here. So we'll fill the glass in around the rest of it like that. Looking good. Very happy we finally have transparent glass pieces in the game. It makes such a difference to be able to build stuff like this. Let's move on and get some lights in. We can move them in exact 2 meter increments using the new tool they ported over from the console version, and then we'll put some picnic tables in so the guests will actually sit there. And then one of the most important things to making realistic looking buildings is a trim across the bottom where it joins on to the floor. This is a really simple building, no crazy shapes or anything like that, so it's really important to get all the details in there to make it look good. So we use this wall decoration trim and recolor it and run this across the bottom all the way around the building, and then we'll add some more utility lights in on the front, and then we'll head up to the roof terrace and start building up there. This part is inspired by a roof terrace I was sitting on myself in Cambodia a few weeks ago, looking out over a market. Really enjoyed it, and I thought it'd be nice to have something like that in the park where you can sit down and look out over all the rides, just have a drink and relax. It's also partly inspired by the real building with a simple framework, and then some sunshades in there as well. Keep guests cool and or dry depending on the weather. We'll put these in here, and then we'll alternate the colours of them between red and white. So along with the blue framework and then the white building, we've got all the colours that we've been using throughout this park to tie everything together nicely. There we go, that looks nice. Make a few alterations, get it looking perfect, and then I want to beef up the glass around the top here so that we've got a proper sort of balcony with glass in it rather than just panes of glass. And then we can move inside and get the actual facilities in. We'll go with a gulpy soda on the right and a chief beef on the left, and then we'll use some of the divided plaster pieces to start tying it all together. And then we'll get some lights in, some more utilitarian standard lights at the top, and then some more attractive lights along the walls. And then we'll move outside for the final detailing. A nice detail I noticed in the original was a menu outside so that guests could see what's on offer inside without actually going into the restaurant. So we're going to use this standard lamp as the base, and then we're going to use this scroll from the mythology theme and shrink this down and use it as a menu. So we're going to have a couple of these so we get it to the right dimensions. So once we've got it securely fixed to the lamp there, we can drag this to the left and then copy one against it so that we end up with something that looks more like a menu. And then we can use some tiny null signs to get the name of the restaurant, food and drink, and then we'll just use some dashes to put some implied text in there as well. And the final thing that we're going to do is the new barriers. Well, I say new, they were already in the game, but they didn't do anything other than look nice. Now they actually stop the guests from walking. So because this restaurant is completely set on a path, the guests can get in anywhere they like. So we'll use these barriers so that they only go in through the door. And that is everything that we're going to build today. Let's check out first the Atlantic Aviator. I love the fireworks when you open a ride. Here is the little planes. I'm so happy with how these have turned out. Time to let the guests on and take a look at it. This is the part where I start to feel slightly queasy looking at this ride. There are some pretty crazy rotations going on. But it just looks so cute, and it is really close to the original, especially considering it's not exactly the same ride. Guests certainly seem to be enjoying it. He is anyway. And this is what it's actually like on the ride. I love that shot of the Cobra going past it. I filmed this before we added the second restaurant in, so let's go and check those out now. Here they are, Viva La Vegan and Bar Liberty. Got some lights added on there since the build as well. I also took the time to finally get the carousel looking the way that I wanted it, with a new roof and a new colour scheme. Just final detailing to go and Lake Liberty is finished. Thank you so much for watching as always. Have an amazing Christmas, and I will see you next Saturday for the final episode of Lake Liberty. Bye.